Today we're talking about multiplying polynomials. Whoops. And remember, a polynomial just means something with more than one term in it. So this is 4.6, and there is an activity that goes with it. And it starts out kind of small, and I think you probably will remember this from the very beginning of algebra when we did order of operations. So it's just kind of a little review of, hopefully you know that this is distributive property. So you distribute that -3, it's negative 21b minus 21, and there is how that is multiplied. So that was a monomial times a binomial. Well, when you multiply polynomials, usually we're talking about two binomials. So it's the same basic property. You're going to distribute the n, and that would give you an 8n squared, because a negative times a negative is positive. Then you're going to distribute that same n to the second term, just like in distributive. That would give you a positive 5n. But when you multiply a binomial, you have a second term to distribute. So you'll distribute the 2, that'll give you negative 16n. And the last part of this, you'll distribute that 2 to the 5. So that would be a negative 10. So it's kind of like a double distributive. You're going to draw those humps and make those connections and multiplication 2 times. The red term came from the red hump, blue term from the blue, green from the green, and purple from the purple. But usually what happens when we multiply these binomials is the two middle terms. And notice the two middle terms here came from this pair of outside terms being multiplied together and the pair of inside terms being multiplied together. So these two middle terms came from the outers and the inners is what we call those, the outers and the inners. The outers were the blue, and they gave us this 5n, and the inners were the green, and they gave us the negative 16n. What's going to happen is those are like terms, and they're going to combine together to give you a negative 11n. But what you need to know is that middle term in a polynomial comes from the sum of the products of the outers and the inners. So you multiply the outers and the inners, and those two factors, when added together, give you the middle term. I want you to pay close attention to that, because we will be going from the polynomial to the factored version in the next lesson. So we'll be working this backward. So pay close attention to your outers and your inners each time you multiply a set of these. Well, then we have things like a monomial times a trinomial, and I hope you remember a trinomial has 3 terms. And so that's not very difficult. It's the same thing you do when you distribute, and just like we did on the very first one, you'll have 3 sets of humps. So the negative 3x cubed times 7x squared will give you negative 21. Remember, if you have the same base and you're multiplying, you add the exponents. So 3 plus 2 is 5. And then the second one, the negative 3x cubed times the negative 8x will give us a positive 24x to the 4th. And then the final distribution, negative 3x cubed times 7 gives you negative 21x cubed. That's already in order from largest to smallest exponent, so it's already in standard form. That is simplified. And if you're looking at the activity that goes along with this, that was number 23, and I apologize I didn't tell you that earlier. And so the correct answer would be C on number 23. Okay? So that concludes this. There's really no more to it, just practice. There is, however, I'm sorry, on here, if you'll go all the way to number 46, it's when you multiply two trinomials. You won't get a lot of these, but just for the sake of practicing your distribution and multiplying numbers with different signs and using your exponential properties and things like that, they like to warm you up on that before we go into factoring those polynomials that are just usually quadratic trinomials when we factor. That's the next lesson, but let's look at this. So the first thing you're going to do is multiply these first two terms. This is like a triple distributive here. That product is a negative 2r to the fourth. Okay, the second product is those two. So negative 2r to the third. Then we get this product. So negative 12r squared. Now we're going to look to this middle term. So it's negative 2r to the third. Then we're going to take the negative 2 times that second one, so negative 2r squared. Then negative 2r, I misspoke, I am sorry. That is a positive 2 being multiplied times that r, so the one that we just did should be a positive 2r squared. And now we're taking the 2r times the negative 6 to give us a negative 12r. We're still not done, because now we have this negative 3 to multiply. So the negative 3 times the negative r squared is a positive 3r squared. And as you can see, I'm running out of room. The negative 3 times the r let me see if I can scoot this over. So the negative 3 times the r, negative r squared is a positive, I'm sorry, the negative 3 times the r is a negative 3r. And the very last thing, the negative 3 times the negative 6 is a positive 18. So in that whole string of terms now, we're looking for like terms to combine. So I'm just going to look, there's only this first term has an r to the fourth power on it. It will not combine with anything else. So I'm just going to rewrite that. Now as far as r cubed or r to the third power, there's two of them. Combine those, you get negative 4r cubed. R squareds, I have a few more. Negative 12, positive 2, that would bring me to a negative 10. And a positive 3 would get me to a negative 7. So negative 12 plus positive 2 is negative 10. Plus 3 is negative 7r squared. And you see how this gets a little bit overwhelming with so many terms everywhere. So if you'll cross them out as you combine them, you will be able to keep this straight longer. Negative 12r and negative 3r are like terms, so that's negative 15r. And the positive 18 just travels along, nothing to combine that with. And now we have combined all of our terms. And if you look at number 46, you will see that the correct answer is A. Okay? So that concludes this lesson. And if you're wanting to YouTube or Google some math games or tutorials on this, video tutorials, what you're looking for is multiplying polynomials. And many teachers will teach a process called FOIL, so you could also Google FOIL, and you'll know the meaning of that after you watch the lesson. It's not difficult. Just know that they sometimes refer to what we just did as FOIL. And for this, you're on usually an 8th or a 9th grade level. Maybe even 10th, but most of it will be 8th or 9th. And if you're below that, it's okay. If you're doing FOIL and it says it's 7th or 6th, that's okay. It will help you as well. All right, so good luck in your practice.